As a visual artist and filmmaker moving to New York City in the 1980s, I was attracted to the underside of New York, the city that I'd seen in movies like Sam Fuller's Pickup on South Street or Naked City by Jules Dassin. Film noir was always an appealing genre for me, not only for its half-lit dark streets, but also for its female characters who possessed a dangerous, intriguing sexuality and unrestrained sense of female sexuality. Hitchcock films attracted me also because they possessed a kind of obsessional quality, Vertigo, Rear Window, Psycho. With Variety, I thought, what about turning the genre of the noir thriller on its head? Woman as investigator and male as enigmatic figure. She usurps the position of the male. She becomes the sleuth in a thriller whose terrain is the language of desire. Exploring New York City and the underground late at night, I came across the Variety Theater. Its neon marquee was unbelievable, something out of the past. The reds, the blues, the greens were dazzling, enticing, and I couldn't stop looking. I've always been fascinated by cinemas and by the cinema and the secretive voyeuristic pleasure I experience when the lights dim and the image comes onto the screen, magnified, pulsating light and shadow. I really wanted to investigate the theater. I got closer and closer and saw the posters, realized it was a porn theater. Eventually, I researched and found out that it had been a vaudeville theater, and before that, a horses stable for the Stuyvesant family, the very wealthy family that were one of the Dutch settlers of New York. But now, in 1980s, it was a porn theater. The booth was amazing. It was the perfect place. I think my film was born in my head right at that moment, with the marquee, the freestanding booth. Everything about voyeurism was present for me at that moment. But more than just a setting or an environment, I wanted to make New York City also a character with its own personality, seen in the garish nighttime quality of Times Square, the hyper-real, overly lit look of the Fulton Fish Market, the baseball game at Yankee Stadium looming like a backdrop from a Hitchcock movie. In her essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, Laura Mulvey argues that the pleasure in looking in cinema is connected with the centrality of the image of the female as object of the male gaze. With Variety, I attempted to reverse, to set the female as subject of the gaze by disrupting the conventions of the thriller genre, where vulnerability and intrusion are expected. I try to do the opposite. The woman transgresses the limits of the situation. She's the voyeur who watches and follows the man, not the enigma to be tamed. But of course, Variety is a film about looking. I use frames within frames, windows, doorways, and reflections in order to visually capture the idea of looking and being looked at. Pornography offered me a way to explore this and to see what it had to say about desire, what kind of fantasies it mobilizes. Pornography substitutes the look for the touch, and it sustains desire, forever promised but never found gratification. It guarantees that no representation will ever fulfill desire, while creating a desire for people to come back and see more. I wanted to address my own sexuality with a voice other than censorship, using fantasy to investigate pleasure. I refuse to let any group or social media dictate my pleasure. To take control of her sexuality, Christine also has to take control of the narrative and the desire that motors all narrative. But actually, the most controversial aspect of Variety was not the inclusion of porn or the fact that the filmmaker was embracing porn as a kind of expression. More disturbing to people was the ending, which intentionally doesn't provide an absolute conclusion. I always knew I would end the film in that way. It is the noir ending, John Lurie's jazz score, the dark, empty street corner at night with lamp-lit, wet ground, forming a glistening pool in the darkness at the corner of Fulton and South Streets. It says that between desire and gratification, lies an empty space, desire as unresolved, but that space is full of possibilities, and it's an opening into the unknown.